Are going to explore the world of showing dogs, because here in Mississippi we have a dog who brought home Best in Show in the working group category. This was back in June, on June 13th. A Bernese Mountain Dog out of Tupelo named George took home Best in Show, and his co-owner Kathy is joining us on Good Things to share a little more. Hey, Kathy.
Hi, Rebecca. How are you?
Is George nearby?
He is sitting at my feet, actually, yes.
Well, good to know that our little buddy is nearby, and I'm super excited to share his story, because the more that I learn about your and George's journey to Best in Show, just the more that I fall in love with everything about it. So let's just get started with, Kathy, how did you yourself, or you and your husband, find y'all's way into showing dogs and ending up on this national stage?
Sure. So it's been a long process. We've owned this breed for about 25 years, and we started out just getting one as a pet because we fell in love with these dogs. I think like a lot of people do at first, with just they're beautiful when you see them, but then when you get to know them, you get to see how sweet they are, and that's the greatest thing about this breed is just how sweet they are, how great they are with kids. They're great family dogs, and so we got our first one, like I said, 25 years ago, and he was just a pet. We did not show him. We loved him dearly. But when we lost him, when he died, when he was 9.5, we decided that we might want to breed some and have some litters of puppies and things like that. And so the more we researched that and started looking for good breeders to get a puppy from and all, we realized that the top breeders out there that were really breeding healthy dogs that we wanted to get a puppy from, they were going to ask us to show a puppy. And we had never done that. I don't think I'd even been to a dog show at that point. And so this breeder up in Virginia that we got our first show dog from, she said that, she would help us, and she did, and was a great mentor. And so we struck out and started learning how to show, and we showed our first dog ourselves and learned a lot that way.
And so when did George come into the picture? Is he a pup of maybe one that y'all were breeding, or did you also find George from, someone else who had the same sort of stipulations that, sure, you can, purchase our dog, but, you've got to also show them?
Right. So we got George from a breeder in New Jersey. We did not breed him. And so the way that came about was that we had just lost a burner. He had died about 4 years ago, named Hershey, and we didn't have a dog for the first time in a long time. There was not a single dog in our house, and that was just sad to come home to a house and not have a dog greet you at the door and all that. And so on Facebook, we have all these different friends that are Bernese Mountain Dog people, and so this breeder in New Jersey, who I did not know, tagged some of my mutual friends in this Facebook post when she had this litter, and she had 9 puppies, and so I knew who the dad was of this litter, this dog named Timer, that I knew was really gorgeous. He's one of the top dogs in our breed for the last 10 years, really, and so I just knew, and also I knew who the mother was a little bit. I knew her pedigree and everything, and so I reached out to her. I thought, probably there's no chance that there's not all spoken for and everything, but I reached out to this breeder and told her about our mutual friends and connections, and to have to get in touch with them and see if they would vouch for me and everything, and so they did, and so anyhow, it turned out that there was one show puppy still not accounted for, and so she that got to be our puppy and everything, and he was about the 4th or 5th pick in the litter out of 9. He was not the pick puppy, and so anyhow, we said yes, we absolutely would show him, and if he turned out, great, and if he didn't turn out, that we would not be upset about that we would be, a beloved pet in our family for the rest of his life, kind of thing. And so she was great with that. So anyhow, but when we started showing him and everything, he just lit it up. I mean, he won some big things, right out of the bat and everything. And so with people who show dogs, generally you go out there and you try and get their championship, and then a lot of people stop there. But once you get their championship, you go into the best of breed ring where you're competing against all other champion dogs, and so then you can start going for their grand championship or things beyond that. And so as we continued forward, George has won at every level that he's gone to.
So, Kathy,
which has been fun.
For a lot of us who are listening to Good Things, we probably find ourselves watching dog shows. It's one of those things, if you come across it on television, specifically the one, that he won, which is the Big Mama Jama, the Westminster Kennel Club dog show. It was the 145th that he took Best in Show in. That's George. You're watching...
Let me say one thing real quick. So he wasn't Best in Show, okay? Because there are a lot of people out there that might, if they watch the show, they might. So he took Best of Breed. So he was the best of the Bernese Mountain Dogs, and so that's why he got to go into the working group. So the Best in Show was the Pekingese, and so he hasn't gotten to that level yet. That would be wonderful, but
we're getting there though, George. We're getting there. Now, one word can mean so much difference in a competition. Okay, so he was Best in Breed. Okay, but still, we're proud of George, but we don't want to take away from the Best in Show. So my apologies to the Pekingese who's listening to Good Things, but for those that are watching, sometimes we think this is more when we think of talent of these dogs or what's being shown. Give us some of the behind the scenes of what is the judge actually looking for? Because we see them strutting their stuff, stopping, standing there so still on command, getting their little snacks every now and then. But what's actually being looked at by the judges?
Right. So every breed has what's called a breed standard, which is like a full page or two of what's exactly expected of that breed. And every breed has a different purpose, like a Husky is expected to pull, a sled, or a Great Pyrenees guards flocks or things like that. And so their structure is tied to what their job is a lot of the time, especially in the working group. And so when a judge is looking at a dog, they are judging it by that breed standard, which they've memorized. The judges all have to know the breed standard. And so they're looking for things initially when they stack, like when the dog comes and he's standing still, they're stacked. And so the dog is looking for whether or not they have a level back or, different angles, with their, in that's their structure. So that's the first thing. And then if they have good structure, they should move well. So then they're looking to see when they move how all those parts come together and everything. So those are the main things: are structure, movement, and then temperament. A lot of times, they want to know if it's a sweet dog or if it's a confident dog or something like that. They don't want a shy dog or a dog that comes across as aggressive or doesn't want to interact with people, things like that. So
this all got started, Kathy, because Rhino shared on Good Things, I guess a while back. It must have been a month ago because that's when you guys went up there and won. When we were talking about the Olympics should have normal people beside them to show how great those athletes are. And he said we should also have that sort of like in dog shows, because I feel like you talk about the temperament or the confidence. Most of us who have fur babies at home, when we're watching how graceful the dogs are and they pause on command and they stand there, we think there's no way I could teach, my pup to do that. So how do y'all get started with that in terms of teaching those skills that are judged, or at least the skill part that's judged? I know some of it's the breeding part that's just at birth, but the judging part, the skill part, how early do y'all start with that?
Yeah, you can start little things when they're 3 or 4 months old, and hopefully if your dog is food motivated, that makes it easier because you can kind of lead them around with treats and things like that. And then you can, convince them that if they'll stand in a certain way or let you move their feet around and then you reward them, then they learn that that's a positive, fun thing, and so you can start fairly early just with little things here and there. And you if you show, you learn, little things from different people. And, so you add something every month or year or so, to what you do with your repertoire of dogs. And so it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight.
Well, it doesn't happen overnight, but it feels like it's happened quicker for George than maybe some other dogs because he won Best in Breed at 3 years old. Why is that significant?
Right. So every breed will mature differently. Sometimes you'll hear on Westminster they talk about, wow, he's only 1 year old or something like that, and that happens occasionally. But most dogs, most breeds, it takes them a little while to develop, and not only physically but also just their head, just kind of their presence of being used to being at a dog show and everything. And so So in our breed, the top dogs in our breed are 4, 5, and 6 years old. And so George at 3, physically, he still has to fill out a little bit more even. It's kind of like he's an 18-year-old football player versus a 24-year-old NFL player, kind of like, So he's full height and everything, but he's gonna fill out more in the next 2 years than he is now.
And we're going to learn more about George's story, getting best in breed in the working group category at the Westminster Kennel Club in 2021. Coming up more, we're getting more behind the story of George. He's a 3-year-old Bernese Mountain Dog out of Tupelo. He took home best in breed at this year's Westminster Kennel Club for the working group category. We're chatting up here on Good Things with his co-owner, Kathy Cook, to learn a little more about the sport and, of course, George. So, Kathy, when I say co-owner, I know sometimes that feels a little odd for people. It's like, how is George co-owned? So how do you answer that question for folks who are wondering about the co-ownership of George?
Sure, right. That can be. I mean, people kind of wonder, okay, does that mean that they could come, other owner could come get him or something like that, or something, he's fully our dog. He's, we signed a contract for him and everything when we got him, which is, again, people may think that's crazy, but we signed about a 5-page contract when we bought him of all the things that we would and would not do. and that's kind of a product of him being a show dog. And ultimately what the co-ownership comes down to is when we start to make breeding decisions, is that I will be doing that in conjunction with his breeder, who is his co-owner and everything. And so she just wants to make sure that we're not going to go out and start a puppy mill with him or make bad choices. And she just wants to have a say in making sure that he is bred to also very sound, good dog, healthy dogs and things like that. And so and his co-owner, his breeder, is someone who's become a really good friend of ours, and that's been a really healthy and good relationship. And so there's no drawbacks to that for us.
Well, that sounds like definitely a good thing. And I am just loving his full name, Divine Prince George, or at least that's what I heard or read that it was. I have to know the story behind the name, Kathy. How did George become, or who had the idea of Divine Prince George and to call him George?
Right. So the litter, I think I mentioned there were 9 of them. And so a lot of the times breeders will have a theme for their different litters. And so this theme was the Divine 9. And so one of the things that she required in the naming was that you use the word divine in the AKC name that you chose. And so, but because we were one of the last people to get in on this litter, a lot of the things that you would think of, like divine intervention or something like that, those were already taken by other people. And so we were like, okay, how are we going to use divine? And then, so Prince George, that comes in another story actually about George, is why he's named George is, so one of the things that's been kind of fun about this breed is that we've gotten to know people all around the country through Bernese Mountain Dog things and everything. And so, and on top of that, we've actually gotten to know some people in Europe that breed Bernese Mountain Dogs, and mostly because of Facebook. And so about 10 years ago, I got a friend request from this breeder in Italy, who is one of the biggest breeders in Europe. And I was like, well, I was delighted to get that. And so I followed along. They're beautiful dogs and everything. And so about 5 years ago, we were over there, and I realized that we were going to be passing right by where these people live. And so I reached out to them and mentioned that, and they said, please drop by. And so we did, and we spent just this amazing afternoon with this family in Italy, and they're 20 gorgeous Bernese Mountain Dogs, and their biggest winning one is a dog named George. And so we said, okay, someday we would love to have a George, Yeah. And so then again, that was like 5 years ago. So anyhow, so when we were trying to come up with a name for this puppy, someone who was in the news a lot at that time was Prince George from over in England. And so we thought, well, we're just going to stick Divine on to Divine Prince George, and there we go, pretty much. And so that's the origin of that name.
I love that. I had a Princess Anne Cuddle Smith. She was a boxer. not a show dog, but she stole my heart.
Sure.
And we called her Cuddles
Sure.
for short. So I just love the story behind the name. And you mentioned that was 5 years ago when you sort of had the name in mind, but George is only 3 years old. So when he goes out to compete, normally there's, sheets or information sheets that are said about the dogs and if you're watching the show, you know it. I mean, you hear the announcer sort of sharing details or maybe the resume, if you want to think of it that way. Well, George is 3, so he doesn't have a resume. So Kathy, how did y'all beef up George's information sheet for whenever he went out and strutted his stuff?
Right. So he's gotten to be on TV twice now. So he had a big win at a show in Raleigh in March, and so we had done this once before. And then leading up to Westminster, they sent it out in advance so that they would have information on the dogs in case they won and everything. And these media sheets that they send out, a lot of times they're asking for, what their big wins are and things like that. And at 3, George didn't have a whole lot of big wins. And so we didn't have a whole lot to fill out on there. So we just decided to go big on the fact that George is from Tupelo, Mississippi, the birthplace of Elvis. And so we just kind of made that a big part of the media sheet. And so it's been fun that both times that he's been on TV, they've introduced him as George from Tupelo, Mississippi, birthplace of Elvis. And so that's kind of become part of his identity, is that he's from Tupelo. And so it's been fun, when we got back to Tupelo from Westminster and everything, people around Tupelo, that was one of their favorite things that they mentioned was that they loved the fact that Tupelo got a part in that. And so,
well, I hope that never changes. I know he won Best in Breed, but we're just going to forecast he'll end up Best in Show, and we hope that he stays. George from Tupelo, Mississippi, birthplace of Elvis. And one day, you'll have, he's the birthplace of George too. So from Tupelo,
right.
From Tupelo, Mississippi. So other than bragging rights, I mean, what do you get when you win Best in Breed? I mean, I'm sure, is there a trophy involved? Does George get like a steak dinner? I don't know if that's kosher if you feed George like that, but what's the celebration like?
Well, as far as food, he likes double quarter pounders with cheese. Okay?
Oh, God, I love that.
so McDonald's, he likes McDonald's, but as far as when you win, there's no money involved. Okay, so ultimately, hopefully, George gets girlfriends. Okay,
there you go, George.
So if George gets girlfriends, then hopefully that helps pay for this, because going to these dog shows and paying for his handler and things like that adds up. And so if he gets girlfriends, then that will help along the way. So.
No, well, I don't. Yep. Looking at George and his beautiful photo, I don't think he'll have any trouble wooing a girl at any time that you guys are ready for him to. But I want to talk about the sport because it feels very prestigious. It feels very kind of stuffy. It feels kind of scary to get involved in if you've never done it. So tell us something you've learned about the sport of showing dogs that may have surprised you since you went in as green can be from the get-go.
Right. I mean, for us, I would say the people that we've met, it's not a stuffy thing at all. Just going out to these local shows. I mean, there's shows here in Mississippi you can go to. There's a great one in Starkville every January, and there's some in Tunica and Jackson and Biloxi, and so you can, if you've never been to a dog show before, you can just go and watch and talk to people. And usually people are pretty friendly and will tell you about their breed or about their dogs or we'll give you tips if they've got time, to stop. They'll tell you things. And so that's been probably one of the most wonderful things about this is that we have made friends all over the South, all over the country, and like I said, even in Europe some, and so that's been an added bonus for us. It's been really great.
Well, I love that, and I love everything about George. So other than he likes his McDonald's, tell us a little bit of like George off of the, there out there doing his thing on the showroom floor. What does George like to do?
Oh, George, he likes to sleep in the air conditioning on the top floor, pretty much. I mean, he's a normal dog, he's our pet, and he's pretty spoiled rotten like a lot of dogs are. And so, I think that, the judge of Westminster, she made a big, comment about that all show dogs are pets, that they're all loved by people and everything like that. And George is certainly that for us. He's our baby. And, We love him very much.
Well, we love George now, and we'll be rooting for him. So what's next for him? Does he have another show that he will be in? Is he taking a break? Is he getting a girlfriend?
Hopefully he's getting a girlfriend, yes. He is. Our next big show is in Greenway, South Carolina in about 10 days, I think. And so that's a big show because there's going to be a bunch of Bernese Mountain Dogs at that show. There's going to be 40, which is in the South. That's a lot at a show in the South. And then, we'll see from there. There's some big shows at the end of the year, like the National Dog Show that comes on Thanksgiving Day. We may go to that. And up in Philadelphia, we may go to the Royal Canin Show, which is down in Orlando in December. And so we'll see, where we go. Again, this year was kind of supposed to be George's ramp-up year. Really, next year when he is 4 years old is when we thought that we would be getting out to some of these bigger shows. So we're kind of reevaluating right now what all we need to maybe be doing with him. So.
Well, Kathy, you make sure you put keeping in touch with us here on Good Things on your to-do list for George, because we would love to follow him as he continues and be able to wish the dog from Tupelo, Mississippi, birthplace of Elvis, as much luck as we possibly can. He's gained new fans today here on Good Things, so I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
All righty. You guys stick with us. We got more good for you coming up next.